Welcome to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. This is a very special edition of the Mike Bates Show. I'm in West Palm Beach, Florida today, speaking with this nation's perhaps finest living hero. And no, that is not an exaggeration. I'm speaking with Chris Noel, and she is a true American hero. If you listen to this program on a regular basis, you've heard me talk about her before. But there's an effort underway right now to give her the recognition that her life's work deserves. There are 3 people who have taken charge of a project that was initiated by Randy Nichols. Then Harry Simons got involved, and then I got involved. Randy and Harry are with me today in West Palm Beach, and they're going to join us in this conversation. The project is to award Chris Noel the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's this nation's highest civilian honor. Now, it's awarded at the sole discretion of the President of the United States, but we are asking that the President do just that. And we're asking you to help by signing a petition to show the support of the American people behind this campaign to award Chris Noel with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. By the end of this hour, I am certain not only will you want to sign it, but you're going to ask your friends to sign it too. Before I introduce Chris, I want to introduce Randy Nichols. Randy, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here.
And Harry Simons as well. Harry, welcome.
I am so proud to be part of this interview with Chris Noel. Let's all honor her in this program.
So, Chris, when I interview people, I never ask them to say anything specific. I always let them use their own words, but I am going to ask you to say 2 words, just your opening 2 words. I don't have to give you those words because you said them nightly from 1966 to 1971. Would you please open your part of this program the way you opened your radio show for 5 years?
Hi, love. This is Chris Noel. I'd like to welcome you to another Date with Chris.
Hi, love. Welcome, everyone, to your Date with Chris. And let's get the show rolling with the Dave Clark 5, and you got what it takes.
And that's how we would start my show. And then I would play some wonderful music. And I would open up letters, and I would make comments from my letters and make dedications to the guys out on their fire bases, on their ships, wherever they may be.
What you just heard is the voice of an angel. She really is. She's an angel. If you were in the United States military between 1966 and 1971, stationed anywhere other than CONUS, the continental United States, you already know she's the voice of an angel because you would have listened to her on a regular basis on the Armed Forces radio and television service around the world. But for those 3.1 million servicemen who served in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, they heard Chris's program on a nightly basis between 1966 and 1971. The show was produced in Hollywood, but she came to them 5 nights a week on the American Forces Vietnam Network. That's a radio network that was run by the U.S. military. It's best known in America these days as the real-life setting of the 1987 film starring Robin Williams, Good Morning Vietnam. It was a heavily fictionalized version of what happened in Vietnam, but it was a real radio network. And Chris Noel was on that 5 nights a week, bringing to the servicemen the sounds of home and the sounds of hope. And so what we're going to talk about during this program are Chris's recollections of what she did in Vietnam and since the end of hostilities. And in her words, you're going to hear why she's a hero. Now, she doesn't think she's a hero. She just thinks she did what she was supposed to do. But she's a hero. So, Chris, let's begin with this. You started out as a cute little blonde Hollywood starlet, starring in Hollywood films alongside Elvis Presley, Steve McQueen, Dennis Hopper, Jackie Gleason. You were a very successful Hollywood actress.
Never had such a great time in all my life.
Thank you.
But then you ended up being the angel for the men in Vietnam. How did that come to be? How did you go from the silver screen to the radios in the jungles of Vietnam?
Well, first of all, I had to have the desire, and that desire came from a Christmas Day when I went to the Balboa and Letterman hospitals in the San Francisco area, and we walked into the gangrene ward of double and triple amputees, and it shocked me. I had never seen so many people that had so many of their arms and legs missing, and to think that they had gangrene, the pain, the agony that had to go with that, it made me just feel horrible. I remember they were not happy to see us. And then Sandy Koufax walked into the room, and I was standing in the back near a fellow, and he was yelling out, "Sandy, throw me the ball." Koufax threw me the ball, actually, he said. And he threw him the ball, and he caught it with his only arm. He had no legs, and he only had one hand. And he caught the ball. And everybody in the place started laughing. And the atmosphere changed. Then they realized we weren't there to make fun of them or to hurt them or anything. But when we left, I felt awful. And I can remember thinking to myself, there has to be something that I as a human being can do to help these people, these men. And I prayed on it, and months later, I had an opportunity to go to Armed Forces Radio and to try out for the radio. And for some reason, they liked me, and I'm the one that got the project. I got my own show, and it was called A Date with Chris. And I used to play music, and I'd read different letters or bits and pieces of letters. And I'd make dedications to the troops, and I would have some interesting people that would come on occasionally to be a guest. Singers mainly that were my guests because it was a musical program. And that's basically what I did.
So you initially visited the servicemen in Vietnam via the magic of radio. But eventually, you went there yourself. How'd that come about?
I wanted to go to Vietnam because I knew I could make a difference. And I was bound and determined that if I ever got to Vietnam, that I would make that difference. So, next thing you know, we get a telegram from the Pentagon asking if I would go to Vietnam as a volunteer. And I said, yes, of course I would. I was so happy. I couldn't believe that I got to go to Vietnam. I went by myself, went out to the airport, hopped on a regular flight to Vietnam, got off the plane. There was a gentleman. "Hello, Miss Noel. I'm Captain Jim Haas. I'm your escort officer. Welcome to Vietnam."
And so what'd you do when you were there?
I did the best I could to be cheerful and happy and try to make them feel good the best I could. So I learned some songs. Let's see. "Give me a ticket for an aeroplane. Ain't got time to take the fast train. Only days are gone. I'm going home. My baby just wrote me a letter." I would sing the letter. I would sing, "Slow down, you move too fast. You gotta make the morning last."
Just kicking down the cobblestones, looking for fun and feeling groovy.
I sing that one. I did some other songs. Anyway, I learned a few songs, and I would sing the songs, and I did the best I could. I went to hospitals. I spent a lot of time in hospitals.
So you did all that in Vietnam. Many performers went to Vietnam, but you did something they didn't do. When we get back from this break, let's talk about what you did in Vietnam. Welcome back to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. I am in West Palm Beach, Florida today, speaking with Chris Noel. And the reason I'm having this conversation is because Randy Nichols, Harry Simons, and I are spearheading an effort to award Chris Noel the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. And I want you to help us accomplish that by signing the petition that is online at www.honorchrisnoel.com. Chris, many people from Hollywood or from the music industry went to Vietnam and entertained the troops with USO shows. But they were typically in the rear with the gear. And although you did at least one USO show with Bob Hope,
we shared our Christmas dinner with Company A of 1st Battalion. The luscious gal in the now famous miniskirt is the voice of Armed Forces Radio, Chris Noel, the round-eyed Hanoi Hannah.
You didn't stay in the rear with the gear. You went to the forward operating bases, right?
Yes, I did.
That had to be a different experience, being in those forward operating bases versus being in the relatively safe areas. I understand in Vietnam there were no safe areas for Americans. I get that. But it was a lot safer well behind the lines than it was where you went. What'd you encounter in those forward operating bases?
Bleakness, very unhappy soldiers. You look at those sad young men, and they were suffering on those fire bases. Gosh, come to think of it, I don't think I ever remember seeing anybody smiling unless I was singing or joking with them or something like that. I don't remember hardly any smiles. But I loved going out into the field because I knew they had nothing. They had nothing. Nothing. They might have some old movies maybe they got to watch back with the gear, but out in the field, those guys had nothing.
And you performed for them.
Yeah.
You sang, you danced, you hung out with them, you signed autographs.
Yeah.
You smiled at me and really eased the pain. The dark days are gone. The bright days are here. My Stevie one shines so sincere. Steve, one so true. I love you.
You were their friend.
I was their friend. I am their friend.
Yeah, you still are, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the program because your love for those men did not end with the end of the war. So, Chris, you're at these forward operating bases, which were very dangerous. They were dangerous for the men serving there.
I remember coming in and they said, "Get her out of here now. We just got hit. We just now got hit. Get her out of here."
And you came under fire. It's not like the base was totally secured just because Chris Noel was there.
No.
You were shot at, were you not?
Several times.
And the forward operating bases that you were at came under fire from either the VC, the Viet Cong, or the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army. You were shot at yourself.
Yeah, I was in a little trailer one night, and I remember in the morning, all of a sudden, I started hearing the firing. I didn't know what was happening. This is my very first trip to Vietnam. So I get down on the ground, I get dressed down on the floor, and I sneak out. And I said, "What's happening? What's happening?" And they're going, "Oh, it's okay. The truce has just been broken, and we're backfiring again."
And in addition to the harassment fire that the base came under, and with you being on the base, well, you came under it as well, you also had a situation where you were on a helicopter that went down. It wasn't shot down, but tell us about
The
that.
hydraulic system went out. We just fell out of the sky, down into the earth in a rice paddy field next to a suspected VC village. And we looked out, way out, and you could see these people coming towards us. And it turned out it was our troops. They came and formed a perimeter around us until another bird came in and picked us up. And then we went on to another fire base.
So thank God you survived that, both the crash landing and being shot at these forward operating bases. But after that, you went back to Vietnam. You didn't say, "Oh, enough of this. I'm out of here."
No, they asked me when I was coming back. I said, "I'll come back as soon as they let me come back. And I'll come back in the summer when nobody wants to come and see you. I'll come and see you."
And how many times did you visit the men in Vietnam?
At least 8. I mean, I never knew how many times I went. I never thought to ever count them. I never thought that I would ever have a reason to ever count them. You go when you go. It's like going to visit your family. You don't count how many times you go to see your mom and dad. And that's kind of like it was. It was like, I'm going back again.
Because those men were your family.
Because they need me.
There was no big action until November. By that time, over 14,000 1st Division men were in Vietnam. Their area of operations was to be a vast portion of central South Vietnam. Sometimes enemy contact was light, and there was more monotony than action. It was a welcome relief between patrols and sweeps to see the pretty face of a USO entertainer.
So at the time, Chris, during the Vietnam War, basically 66 to 71, when you were on the air with your A Date with Chris program, you were doing your job on the air. You were visiting the men at the forward operating bases in Vietnam. You were performing for them. You were visiting them in the hospitals. You were holding their hands. You were signing autographs. You were giving them something to enjoy for the moment. You were laughing with them. They were having fun with you. All that was great. But it wasn't until after the war that you realized just what a big deal that was. Chris, in previous conversations that you and I have had, and in the documentary that Harry Simons and I produced in 2015, you talked about how when you came back to the States and the men came back after the war, you met GI after GI after GI, or friend of a GI after friend of a GI after friend of a GI, who told you unbelievable stories about what you meant to them during the war. Can you share some of those with us now?
Well, I remember in New York, they took some film in to be developed. When I went back in to pick up my photos, the fellow behind the counter thanked me for saving his buddy's life. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And it turned out, he says, well, my buddy was in Vietnam, and he would talk about you all the time. And he would say that if it weren't for you, he probably would have killed himself. And it's just not unusual. I hear it all the time. In 1980, I think it was 1980, I was at an event, and all of a sudden this guy comes up to me, and he said, "Hi, Chris. I just want to tell you," I'm paraphrasing, "I just want to say that if it wasn't for you, I probably would not be here. I would have taken my life if it wasn't for you, because I could hear your voice and I felt some hope." Then it happened again and again and again. Grown, strong men, they would have tears in their eyes, and tears would go down their faces. And how could I not pay attention to them and listen to them? Even though I couldn't believe it myself, I didn't understand it. But somehow or another, I guess I did what I was supposed to do.
You meant a lot to those men. And those men meant a lot to you. After the war, here in the States, you attended all kinds of veterans events. You spoke at the veterans events. You spent time with the veterans. The war was long over, but you continued to love those Vietnam veterans. Most of America, or at least to be certain that I'm accurate, too much of America, abandoned those men. You didn't.
No, and I won't.
And then in 1993, you opened up Vetsville in Florida. Why did you open Vetsville? What was its purpose?
I couldn't stand all the homeless veterans I was seeing. So I started opening up shelters. I had 8. Like near killed me, but I had 8 shelters at one point, and I only have 1 now in Boynton Beach, and that's enough for me. I mean, I'm 82, and I do the best I can. I help as many people as I can, 11 at a time, and I hopefully can get them back on the road again, because it saddens me when I see so many, particularly the Vietnam guys. They really grab me because they shouldn't have to suffer so much. They've suffered greatly.
Vetsville is still open. All these years later, you're still open, and you're still providing services to homeless veterans.
I'll do it until I die, yes.
You're giving them love, help, and perhaps most importantly,
love. What a word. I've been thinking the last couple of days about my saying I love all the time. I keep saying I want people to know that it really had to do with love. A part of me had to let people know that people cared about them, that somebody loved them. Love is a very interesting word. It's not used very much. It's not used enough. We don't use it enough with people that we care about. Harry, you were in Vietnam. The entire time you were in Vietnam, did anybody ever tell you that you were loved?
No.
So you had approximately 2 full years of no one ever saying that you were loved or I love you?
Well, not anybody that was in country. The only love that I may have heard was from letters from home, but never from anybody that was in Vietnam. Why did you introduce your program?
With High Love?
Yeah, well, High Love? That was every program.
Yes.
Why?
Why?
Yes, why?
It was my signature.
What were you trying to communicate?
I was trying to convey that they were cared about. When I would say High Love to them all the time, they liked that. And they loved it when I would say goodbye. And I would say, well, bye, love. See you next week or tomorrow or whatever it would be. I hope you tune in again. And I would always end my show with bye, love. Because I needed to use the word love. They needed to hear the word love. Because we don't love enough.
You were trying to communicate your love
to the troops.
Did you realize at the time that they needed to hear your expression of love as bad as you needed to communicate it?
No, I don't think so. I hardly ever use the word love, but I did on my radio show because that's what I knew I had to do. And love is, to me, the most powerful word there is.
Earlier, Chris, when I was talking about Vetsville, which is what is your life's mission now.
Yes.
I talked about how you were giving the veterans help and love. And before I could say the last word that I wanted to say, you talked in great detail about love. And that was very powerful. There's no question you've loved the veterans. But I think the greatest thing you've given these veterans, both in Vietnam and today in Vetsville, is hope. Because without hope, why do you even want to live to tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
What you've done your entire adult life, Chris, has given veterans hope. And you've loved them. And they've known that you've loved them. And that is why I believe there is no one in this country more deserving of the Presidential Medal of Freedom than you.
Thank you.
It's not something you've asked for, but it's something you deserve. And it's something that hopefully you will get. And if people will go to www.honorchrisnoel.com and sign the petition, that would be helpful. One final thing, Chris, before this show ends. You began the show with your...
Hi, love.
Exactly. Would you now end our show the way you ended your radio show?
Oh, it's time for me to go. I just want to say, bye, love.
I'm Mike Bates.